Let's start things off with a look at the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper for today. These are the stories on the front page. We start with disturbing developments from Yobe. You can see the pictures there of the aftermath of the Boko Haram attack on 27 Task Force Brigade base at Buniyadi in Gujba local government area of Yobe State on Saturday. It says Boko Haram attack Yobe military brigade killed 4 soldiers. You can find the details on page 6. And on page 35, you have the story about flight disruptions. Passengers narrate ordeal. Experts suggest solutions. I can tell you that there are some people within the office who I believe also experience this particular development. And it's not particularly a new issue, so to say, in the Nigerian aviation space. And air travel has become quite toxic, to say the least, in terms of customer service. 54 billion naira released to schools, 24 billion to students, according to the NEL Fund Managing Director. And that is one of the top stories trending over the weekend. And in other news, the World Bank says poverty is rising in rural Nigeria. The Africa Development Bank president, who is also familiar with the development, says Nigerians worse off than 64 years ago. In fact, just to give you some context before we get to page 3 and 4, where that story continues, is that the GDP per capita has gone the lowest we've ever had since independence. Presidency fault additional's comment, of course. Action Aid blames corruption for what's happening with the Nigerian economy. And finally, on the front page, just below that picture of the attack in Yobe, you have Lakurawa mounts massive attack in Sokoto, kill 13 hunters.
All right, next up, we have a leadership newspaper. On the front page, we have lawyers lament delays in judicial trials. At the top, we have Serap. NGE urged federal government to review Cyber Crime Act. At the top left, all the way at the top, we have Meta's $220 million fine signals new era in digital regulation, says NPAN.
Yeah, well, then what if we end up losing our Facebook and Instagram? My goodness.
I don't know what Nigerians would do, to be honest, with the dependency on social media, especially Facebook at this point, with the mass amount of people on Facebook. On the top right, we have federal government pledges to settle 4 trillion naira power sector debt.
All right, let's go into some of the details of these top stories this morning with our guest or our newspaper reviewer. Dr. Theophilus Abba is the program director of the Daily Trust Foundation. He's joined us this morning, conscripted by our producer this morning. Doctor, good morning. Good to see you again. How was the weekend?
Thank God it was fine.
Good. Let's start from home. Press freedom has been an issue over the past 72 hours, obviously because of the commemoration. It's not necessarily a headline news, but it's something that allows journalists to bring some of these stories to life. Talk to me about how this concern is growing around Nigeria when it comes to what journalists are dealing with on a day-to-day basis to get the job done, which is to keep the public informed and hold leaders accountable.
Okay, thank you very much. If we talk about press freedom in the contemporary era, we go back to 2012 when Jonathan signed the Freedom of Information Act. And we thought that was what we needed to do journalism unhindered. Because if you read the act, it tells you clearly that journalists have the freedom to access government information, everything about government contract, everything about government activities, about their staff members, whatever you need to know about the activities of government, you can access. That's what the Freedom of Information Act says. Except issues that have to do with maybe foreign relations and military operations. You may not necessarily begin to ask the military, when else are you going to attack Boko Haram? You know, what weapons are you going to buy in order to, you wouldn't need, or what are the discoveries you are making in terms of weapons? You can't ask the military to tell you all, because those are secrets that should not be revealed.
Information.
Now, but something happened in 2015, when we had what we call the Cybercrime Prevention Act. And this act is now being, I use the word misused. It's being misused because many journalists have been, invited by the police to give account unnecessarily. For instance, if a journalist is doing an investigative report and he calls the other party, Mr. B, I'm working on this investigation, your company got this contract, executed up to this point, but the information we have is that you were supposed to build 5 blocks of classrooms, you built 3. Now, we want to know what happened, why didn't you complete, we want to interview you. That person will send the information to the police and say you are engaged in cyber stalking. And then the police will invite you and say, why are you harassing this guy? You understand? I know there are so many, the expressions in that act, like Cybercrime Act.
And do you think it's been exploited to a degree to stifle journalism?
So but if you are invited by the police and you ask, okay, these are the things I'm looking for, the police could even ask you, one of my friends will ask, who are you? Who gave you the authority to investigate? It was there, don't you read the Constitution, Section 22 says the press can hold government accountable. You say, oh, how are you? What authority do? Are you a DSS? Are you a ICPC? Are you FCC? Why are you investigating him? Who are you to investigate? Even some of these police officers exhibit their ignorance. And then the worst case occurs in rural, let me use the word rural states, where state governments can harass bloggers. You'll be missing.
Private citizens.
Yes. You'll be missing. I said, what happened? So he said something about the governor's wife. He wrote on her Facebook that the governor's wife's headgear was too big. And so the police arrested her for, defaming the governor's wife.
But what happened to freedom of speech?
So that's where we are. So we have documents that gives us the freedom, but then we are not allowed because some persons are exploiting the law, some persons are interpreting the law in the other way around. Unfortunately, and I say unfortunately, you see, government knows that this is happening. We have cried out that you cannot use the Cybercrime Act to do this. The idea of the Cybercrime Act is this. Somebody has money in his bank account, and some other guys access the bank account. So you have 2 billion, 5 billion in your account. They start sending an email. So if you don't transfer this money to me, I'm going to expose your children. I tell the world where your children are going to school unless you send this money to me. And most time when you ask this police, say, okay, what is the cyber stalking in this matter? He say, why did you put it online? You want him to give you money? I say, no, it's not as if you want him to give. Did I ask for money? The journalist did not ask for money. Why are you not calling cyber stalking? If I say, okay, I have this story about you, and I want you to state your own side of the story, it's not cyber stalking. It's even basic ethics. Yes. Journalism, look, you must hear the other side.
You have to balance the story.
The police will say, oh, you asked for money. There was a call you made. If you were not asking for money, why were you sending the messages persistently? So I want to say very clearly that the police must desist from being used. They must set themselves free from being used. Because every time you are investigating any prominent person, any prominent business, and you ask them, look, we want to talk to you on this matter, they will say, oh, you are it's cyber crime. You are harassing me. In fact, there's another aspect they call spreading fear. That when I got the message, I became afraid. And so because I became afraid, it means that they are terrorizing me. So it's anti-terrorism or whatever. So all these flimsy things come up to disrupt what we do as journalists. Because if we cannot hold the people who are in authority accountable, if we cannot ask them questions, then what are we doing as journalists? If all we do is to say, oh, Mr. A is the best person in the best governor, Mr. B is the best senator. Mr. C has sponsored the most bill. Mr. D has done community, done some things for his community. If that is all journalism is all about, then we should not be doing journalism.
But then, do you believe that they are purposely stunting those investigations, or are they not fully versed in those acts and those rule of law for them to execute what they need to execute or follow up on people that they need to follow up? Is it deliberate, or is it ignorance?
Of course, that's what I'm saying. It's very deliberate. They know that, look, they are misapplying the law. They are misinterpreting the law. They are using the law to intimidate journalists. They use the law to intimidate and most times when these cases go to the court of law, I mean, most courts say, go get out. This is not. It's not intimidation. And we have many examples. I mean, it's not a cyber crime. We have many examples of journalists who have gone, who have been taken to court, and at the end of the day, the persons can't defend the accusations against journalists. But the thing is that what they are doing now is to intimidate journalists, to create fear among journalists. And of course, that many journalists don't have money to defend themselves in court. Right. They say, okay, please, let's withdraw this case. Let's settle out of court. Okay, don't do this investigation again. You don't even have the local time to do an investigation. Or stop your story, so that the case will be settled. And many journalists will back out. So the government needs to come out to say, look, cybercrime, journalism is not a cybercrime. Journalism cannot be interpreted in any way to become a cybercrime, because the idea of the Cybercrime Act is to prevent the use of the internet to defraud people, to harm government assets. Okay. And what journalists are doing does not harm government assets.
Right. Okay, let's switch gears now. Talk about this obvious phenomenon that we're dealing with, poverty. According to the World Bank, it's getting worse. 75% is the percentile that we're dealing with here. But to provide some context also, the Africa Development Bank President, Akumi Additional, also said Nigerians are worse off than they were 64 years ago. And that in itself is something to ponder on. But what do you make about the projections and the analysis of the status quo?
Well, I think the World Bank is stating the obvious, because we're actually worse off than we were, so many years ago. I remember when I started journalism in 1996. When I started journalism, my salary was 4,000 naira, and that 4,000 naira, I was surprised. I could do a whole lot with that 4,000 naira, because it was enough for me to transfer myself to the office, to rent a house in Lagos. I rented a house in Lagos, 4,000 naira. And do you know what? About 3 years later, I got married. My salary was 4,000 naira. So you can see that if you earn 400,000 naira today, if care is not taken, you won't be able to meet all your expenses until the end of the month. That is the practical aspect of it. Now, if you look at the chart, I don't know whether it was the World Bank that had the chart, or Akiumi who had the chart. You look at the chart about 64 years ago, it was like $864 dollars. Then it
GDP
rose.
Per capita.
GDP per capita. It rose to about 1,400. At between 2012, 2013, 2014, then the thing began to slide down. Now it is about 600 dollars. So you see, if you look at it from the practical experience, it's true that we are poorer than we were. Our grandparents were richer than we are. I mean, there was a time I was told you could buy a car with 3,000 naira. Today, if you want to buy a car, even if it's a Tokumbo car, if you don't have about 3 million, 4 million, you'll be able to buy even a car that's used in Nigeria. You can imagine. So the situation is not good. And I'm feeling that I don't know how economists are looking at it. Now, if you are in the UK, let's say, okay, I went to the UK in 2010. There was a training program we had in the UK in 2010. In 2010, if you wanted to eat in an expensive restaurant in UK then, dinner about £10 rather. £10, 2010. When I went back to the UK in 2024, we had a program in 2024, I could still eat with about £12, you know, a lunch or dinner. And that was, if I wanted to eat for less than that, £5 or £6 or £7, I could still get food that will, that will fill me with £6, £7, £8, you know. When I paid 12, it was like I wanted to just eat at one of the best restaurants. Now, you discover that there's a measure of stability. Even if there's a devaluation of the pound, it's not as massive as what we have seen here. You know, the devaluation of the naira is so massive that it's unbelievable. You know, like my son came back from school the other time and said, Daddy, our teachers are on strike. They were complaining. I said, why are they complaining? He said that their teacher told them that when she was employed, rice was, a bag of rice was about 7,000. But now, then at that time, the bag of rice was over 80,000. And my son was asking me, so why would government do that? How can a bag of rice be 7,000 when this one was employed? Her salary was not increased, and now a bag of rice, how is she going to meet up? And you see, the way the economy is, the devaluation of the naira is totally unacceptable. Right. And you know, I don't know, when you talk, they will say, oh, if you are in government, but those in governments know that look, we can't continue to do things like this. They have to do macroeconomic adjustment and fiscal policy adjustment and monetary policy adjustment because we cannot cope. Right. You know, we cannot cope. Now, the quality of life is actually worse than it.
And I think, like you did say, this is like preaching to the choir right now because we're all too familiar. Even without the data, we can all feel it in our day-to-day lives at this point. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time can permit us to discuss at this moment. Dr. Theophilus Abba, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for stopping by this morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And of course, that wraps things up for today's edition of the program. Daybreak returns tomorrow live at 8 a.m. Until next time, I'm Abdullahi Ahmed. Good morning.
And I'm Hawa Adamikiawa. Thank you for always being with us.